We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Monday, January 26, 2026. Thanks for coming along with us today on the rumble.com/amradpod and YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast. Also Spotify, iHeart, and iTunes, any of those audio formats, as is our usual course of coming to you every weekday at noontime. Today is a brand new week. Hopefully everybody survived the polar vortex, winter apocalypse that went on around the country, everywhere except my state of Florida. I have Florida privilege. Florida is not only the land of milk and honey, it's also the place that woke and ice storms goes to die. So had a good weekend, was out there playing pickleball and flag football, wearing shorts, and I'm not going to apologize for it because I went forward with the last full measure of devotion in 7 years in Northwest Iowa, and I have seen my last winter, and I refuse to apologize for being warm in January like I should be every single month of the year. All right, it's a new week. What are we going to be talking about today? Treading on Me, playing on this piece that I found over at Reason.com, which went into where have all the conservatives gone? Why isn't anybody pushing back on what's going on from the executive branch that is seeming to embrace the Democrat National Committee's platform from the 2024 election cycle? Also, the House GOP saves a vehicle kill switch and wants to fund the Department of Education. DEI is thriving at the Small Business Administration. Department of Homeland Security is paying illegals to leave the country. And then we're going to transition to some stuff that could bode a little bit better. We're always doing the black pill thing. So I want to leave you on some more positive notes. An appeals court seemingly ruled the wrong way, but it doesn't really, I think, give us the bad ending that we all wanted when it comes to the anti-ICE protests that went on in defiance of the FACE Act in Minneapolis. Also ending aid to Somalia. And the nuclear option for California truckers is on the table. So a lot to get to today. Thanks for being with us, and let's get after it. And let's begin with Reason.com, a libertarian leading source. Some of their stuff's pretty good, particularly on civil asset forfeiture. I've got one of those in the hopper. I think we'll probably get to it later this week. And on other things, they're kind of open borders. So don't necessarily agree with them on everything, but I think they make a pretty good and fair point here on assessing where the Republican Party is right now in its support for Donald Trump and some of the initiatives that the administration is going forward with that aren't conservative at all. So the piece is called Where Have the Don't Tread on Me Republicans Gone? And I mean, it has an irreverent picture of the Don't Tread on Me Gadsden flag, but it's a snake with a leash wearing a ball gag and a red cap and reads, "Tread on me, daddy." All right, I get it. Reason, you're not really a fan of the president, but is it well-founded? Well, let's read into it a little bit and find out, because they got some receipts here, guys. Now, have you noticed the latest policy plans from Donald Trump? His economic proposals echo the Democrat platform. He plans to cap interest rates on credit cards at 10% and actually called Elizabeth Warren to hash out the idea. Donald Trump wants to ban large institutional investors from buying single-family homes, similar to an idea pushed by Gavin Newsom, except Trump wants to totally ban it, and Newsom wanted to only go partly there. So agreeing with Elizabeth Warren and Gavin Newsom. Also proposed a cap on compensating CEOs at defense contracting companies. Called for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those are government entities, to buy over $200 billion in mortgage bonds from the private market and potentially lower mortgage rates. Has actually pressured private companies like Intel to sell portions of the company to the government, proposed a tariff dividend check, $2,000 stimmy check to America, and announced $12 billion bailout for farmers to mitigate his tariff policies. Now, are any of those initiatives conservative? Are they small government minded, small r Republican, constitutional republic? We have a very finite list of duties and responsibilities that the American people expect from the government: coin some money, make some treaties, protect against fraud and force, defend the border. That's about it. Back to the promote the general welfare idea that I've been proffering on the American Radicals podcast for the last couple weeks or months now at this point. Promote the general welfare is listed in the preamble to the Constitution, but it's not welfare in the context that we understand it today. It's not Obama phones or government health care or child care. It's doing what is necessary to protect our life, liberty, and our property, and that's about it. I kind of listed those off pretty quickly, but I think it's worth going into a couple of them in a little bit more detail, because it gets a little bit nerdy, but it's worth just diving into with the mortgage-backed securities angle. Now, go with me and see if this sounds a little bit reminiscent. If you remember this whole thing that happened around 2008, when the entire global economy collapsed because our federal government was pushing lending institutions to give mortgage loans to people who would not ordinarily qualify. We were giving the ninja loans, which is an acronym that means no income, no job, no assets, and you can get a home in America. So you can live the American dream, because property values are just always, always, always going to go up. Didn't matter if people weren't going to be actually able to pay the mortgage payments, because they figured, well, I mean, they'll just flip the house in time and we'll get out of this. And then, in their infinite wisdom, our banking system and our government decided to say, hey, individuals' ability to repay money to a bank that they borrowed is something that other people can invest in. So a little bit like gambling, but we're going to put some nice terms to it and call it mortgage-backed securities, which is, we're going back down this road again. So in this reason piece, it goes into how the president wants to bring down interest rates to buy a house. And the strategy he wants to employ is to get the government to buy up these mortgage-backed securities, which are still an investment instrument. And I don't know why. They seem like a really bad idea, seeing as how it nearly collapsed the global economy about a decade and a half ago. Now, if our government buys these up, they become more lucrative for banks to issue, because, hey, we're just going to give these loans out to people, and we're going to be able to flip it around and sell it to Big Daddy government, and that's going to be good for everybody. So let's give more loans out to people. How do you give more loans out to people? Well, two ways. One, which is what the president's counting on, is you lower the interest rates. You make it more appealing for people to borrow money. The other is you just loosen the standards. Your due diligence doesn't have to be so buttoned up. And, that guy over there, he doesn't actually earn an income because he doesn't have a job. And when we asked him for any sort of collateral that he might be able to put up because he wants to borrow money from us, he doesn't have anything, but the US government's going to buy it. So maybe we should issue a ninja loan to him. History just seems to have a way of rhyming, doesn't it? The other one that I think is worth throwing out is the reference they make to Intel. Now, the federal government kind of strong-armed Intel to sell stock shares or ownership shares of its company to the United States government. How is that not picking winners and losers? Is picking winners and losers in the Constitution, by the way? Is it in the Good and Plenty Clause that's written in invisible ink on the back of the Declaration of Independence, waiting for Nick Cage to find it in the next National Treasure episode? So it's not related to any of the duties and responsibilities of the charters that we have for our federal government. But at the same time, again, go with me. Could this end up in a bad situation? We're having the federal government invest in a company. Now, let's say it's benign and innocent, nothing nefarious here. The government's going to invest in this company, and then the company value is going to go up, and then the portfolio the portfolio that our government has, like it's got its own mutual fund happening, its own 401k, like you do where you work, the portfolio goes up. So we made money on this and it didn't actually cost the American taxpayer anything. But what about influence? If you buy a stock in a company, you're allowed to go to the shareholder convention. You can vote on what happens at the company if it's a publicly traded company. You can ask questions of its executive leadership and board of directors. Now the government can do that. So what's stopping the government under President American Psycho Gavin Newsom, who wants to do the same thing that Donald Trump does as it comes to banning private institutions from buying houses? But let's say that President American Psycho Gavin Newsom, he uses the Treasury to buy stocks in companies that he wants. And then, as the chief executive of our country in this fictional future that could never possibly happen, he can exert a little bit of influence on those companies. Let's say that a president invests in a social media company like a Facebook. Oh, and we don't like all that misinformation going on there, that disinformation, that malinformation, things that are true but are just inconvenient for the government. So we think you should change your standards and take it away from the platform. We're not violating the First Amendment. This is just a private company after all. So all these things seem to be afoul of what a small r Republican individual, small government, fiscal conservative, constitutionally driven perspective you would have from the right of center party. And nobody seems to be pushing back on the president with any of these things. And I don't think Donald Trump's a conservative by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's a Democrat from the 1990s, a New York Democrat from the 1990s. So probably even more leftist than most Democrats were during the Bill Clinton era. But because he's claimed control and he's the most important Republican in our country, in the entire world right now, there's a lot of individuals who are elected officials or ambitious to become elected officials, or they want to get to higher office. They want to hold on to the office that they have. They're not really willing to step out of line and to push back on the president from the right. From the left, oh, that's fine. Even if you're a Republican, that's why you got Lindsey Graham out there who's arguing for things that are diametrically opposed to what the Republican Party of 10 years ago was arguing, diametrically opposed to what Donald Trump was arguing as a newly minted Republican 10 years ago when he ran for president the first time. Donald Trump was berating Barack Obama for the debt, which has grown exponentially under his leadership now, not just one, but a quarter of the way through his second administration. Now, reference to the legislative branch, Lindsey Graham, let's start with a couple different pieces there. The first one is actually in the lower house, and that is the House of Representatives, which voted to stop an amendment that was proposed that would have stopped a kill switch in cars. So essentially, the House of Representatives voted to allow car manufacturers to mandate car manufacturers to insert a kill switch in your car in which artificial intelligence will monitor your driving and be able to shut the car down if it deems you to be driving poorly. So the piece that I have comes from Newsweek, and we will digest it. And there's a couple of adjacent pieces that are worth kind of getting into as we're talking about being tread on by our, quote, conservative politicians and leaders in government. 57 House Republicans approved this vehicle kill switch. Now, the actual amendment came from Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who's probably one of the more conservative members of either chamber of Congress, and yet he's an enemy. 57 Republicans joined with 211 Democrats in voting against it. Now, this technology doesn't actually exist. So we're kind of preemptively voting on these measures. It's not like Ford is about to launch a new line of F-150s that has HAL in it, or Knight Rider, who's going to be able to deem, you're swerving around a little bit too much. Maybe you're distracted. Maybe you're intoxicated. Something's wrong. So I'm just going to shut the engine off. And then how do you get it to turn back on, by the way, just parenthetically? Is there a timeout period, or do you have to call the government to come and turn it back on? I don't know how it would even work. So we're in the theoretical, but the history lesson here is a little bit noteworthy when we're talking about the conservative Republicans who allowed this to happen. Now, this technology doesn't exist, but the idea of it was laid out in this bill that was passed under the Biden administration, the first year of the Biden administration, called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Now, I'm just got a little summary here. And back to, what do the American people through our social compact expect, demand that the government do? Coin some money, pass some treaties, defend the border, fraud and force. That's about it. And yet, our federal government pushed through a $1.2 trillion budget that did the following. It's also known as the bipartisan infrastructure law, because as long as they get one Republican, it's bipartisan. They just met in the middle, like Carl Weathers and Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator with that really awesome handshake. This is what compromise is all about. So the bipartisan infrastructure law signed in November, $1.2 trillion to, quote, modernize the nation's infrastructure. Good and plenty clause? I don't know. I guess interstate is what they're going to say. So ergo, the federal government has oversight of it. We're going to fund roads, bridges, public transportation, broadband internet, water systems, power grids, and more, with the aim of boosting the economy by creating jobs. We're going to create jobs and boost the economy by spending taxpayer money. So stealing it from you via taxation, or printing more of it, or borrowing more of it on the backs of your children. So we flood $1.2 trillion into the system that wasn't there originally. So there's now more dollars chasing around fewer goods that cause the value of your dollars in your bank account to become worth less and worth less until they become worthless. It's otherwise known as inflation, to save the economy. Now, how did the vote go? Well, it originally started in the House and then it had to go to the Senate. Remember how a bill becomes a bill on PBS? We learned all of that. But often the houses don't have the exact same bill. They'll make minor adjustments and it has to go back and forth until they finally agree on the exact same thing. So that's what happened here. The House passed it. It went to the Senate. The Senate made some adjustments, sent it back to the House, and the House agreed to what the Senate had proposed. And then they put it on Joe Biden, the human Roomba's desk, and the auto pen, I'm sure, signed it. It was bipartisan, right? Well, I found out just how bipartisan it was. The original passage happened, and this is going to be difficult to see if you're watching us here on YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast, or Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. But you will see that 219 Democrats and 2 Republicans were able to pass it on the first time. Well, then it went to the Senate, and the Senate voted 69-30 in order to pass their own version of this bill, 69-30. I think after the 2020 election, when the 2021 Congress came in, did it have 30 Republicans? No. I think it had something like 50 Republicans. It essentially assured that Kamala Harris would be the tie-breaking vote, which would mean that 40% of the Republican caucus signed on to do things or nowhere close to the responsibilities of the federal government. But they passed their version. Then it went back to the House. I mean, how close was it? Well, here's the vote from the House. On the second version, the Senate-approved version, you'll see 215 Democrats, 13 Republicans voted yes, and it passed by 22 votes. 22 votes, 13 Republicans. So if 13 Republicans don't betray the people that put them there and actually voted the other way, we don't spend $1.2 trillion. And we don't get a carve out in there that says that car manufacturers have to manufacture automobiles that are the judge, jury, and executioner of you using artificial intelligence at some point in the future to say that, you're driving kind of irresponsibly. So we're going to just eliminate your ability to move now. Now, I kind of worked my way through this slowly. but I want to make the overarching point here. And I'll take it out of the context of politics, government, current events. I think you have to do a bottom line budget analysis here when you're doing any sort of assessment. Reverse your thinking. Now, I remember actually having a conversation with a FBI agent at one point. He actually investigated white collar crime, which was interesting because he sucked with money when we were having this conversation. It blew his mind when I pointed out what I'm about to tell you. Now, he had come into some money. I think he got a gift or an inheritance, something that it was like $50,000 he was about to get. And he said, yeah, I just got 50 grand. And I'm thinking about buying the property that's next to where I live right now. And I'll just then have a larger overall property. I said, okay. Do you own your property right now that you currently live on? No, I have a mortgage about $200,000 on it. Okay. All right. Now, he's not a ninja loan guy, so he's making the payments. That's okay, and that's normal. I said, well, I don't think you should do it, and let me lay it out for you. You're proposing that you're going to keep your mortgage at $200,000, and then you're going to buy this property, right? So you own the property and then owe the bank $200,000. Yeah. So what if instead of owing 200, you only owed 150 to the bank? Would that be a good thing? Yeah, that'd be a great thing. I said, all right, let's say in a fictional world, you owed the bank $150,000. Would you borrow another $50,000 on your current house to buy the land next to you? Well, no, that would be ridiculous. I said, well, that's what you're doing right now. Think about it. You'd still have a $200,000 outstanding and you'd own the property next to you. Either way, you're in the exact same bottom line position financially, but it sounds way different when you lay it out that way. Now, snap back to the comparison I'm trying to make here. Allegedly, there was a popular election that transpired in this country in 2024. And the Republicans got control of not just the White House, but the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now let's go to the House, where they do have a majority. It's not enormous, but they do have a majority. But do they? I mean, they have ours by their name. But if the opposition party, the Democrats, vote lockstep, all of them, every single time together, no deviation at all, and then, more than three, well, let's say a dozen Republicans consistently defect to the Democrats, doesn't that mean the Democrats have a majority? That seems like a kind of a problem. It might also explain why a lot of the actions that are going on, not just as it pertains to kill switches in cars, are happening. So let's now talk about the Department of Education, which the American people voted. There was a mandate, and Donald Trump said, we're doing away with the Department of Education. I'm tired of every single Republican who gets elected president making this part of their campaign promises. I'm going to make it happen. Nobody ever has. And he's tried, but that's going to take some help and assistance from our Article 1 powers, the legislature. And according to my buddy, Daniel Horowitz on the Conservative Review podcast, the Republicans just absolutely crapped the bed on it, or did it on purpose.
What about the Department of Education? Trump abolished it, right? Well, actually, it would receive $78.7 billion in discretionary spending, not to mention the mandatory with the Pell Grants. Pretty much a tiny increase from Biden's levels, but roughly the same. So whatever happened to abolishing the Department of Education? I just don't get it. But this is where we are. It would prohibit the administration. It actually has a Democrat rider. It would prohibit the administration from transferring DOE funding to other agencies, which was his plan. And they got it.
Daniel Horowitz, Conservative Review Podcast. If you get done with the American Radicals podcast, you should check him out. He's a really smart guy. He knows way more about this stuff than I do. He's been really gracious to me, had me on his show a few times. And also, fun story, Daniel Horowitz, if you ever get him on the phone, he talks to you one-on-one like he's on a podcast. he'll go for like an hour and 20 minutes, and you'll get in maybe a sentence or two. You feel like you've monopolized his time when it's all over, as he's just regurgitated everything that he's planning to talk about in his podcast. It's fun times. But he points out there, and I have an adjoining piece that comes from highereddive.com, and it gives a little bit of detail about how the Republicans agreed to fund the Department of Education that we were reliably informed was going bye-bye. And it's actually, they wanted to up the funding that it got. So in 2025, it got about 78.7 billion. The Republicans want to give it 79 billion now. So they actually want to give it more money. And as Daniel pointed out, they're not going to allow the funds to be reallocated to other agencies, which was sort of Trump's plan, which isn't really conservative. I mean, they're still spending the money. They're still doing things that aren't part of the charge of our Constitution: defend the border, fraud and force, coin some money. And yet we can't even get that done. In fact, one of the elements of the Department of Education that Trump wanted to significantly pare back was the Office of Civil Rights that exists within the Department of Education, because your government's way too big. They like to investigate civil rights violations, but they don't have any criminal enforcement mechanism. And we've covered this way back when. I mean, Rose Lopez in the Rumble chat, rumble.com/amradbot. You're going to have to dig into the archives for this one, because I know that I've talked about this before. The Office of Civil Rights that is within the Department of Education, and how under the Biden administration, they were coming in with a record number of complaints because people can call the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights for any reason at all. It doesn't even have to be their school. They don't have to be in the school. They don't have to have kids in the school. The school doesn't have to be in their area. They can just call anytime. And in fact, the story came out that they got like 18,000 calls in 1 year. And that was a huge uptick to what they were getting normally, like 7,000. So nearly a threefold increase. And almost half those calls came from one person who basically just redialed the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights over and over and over again every single day, and they had to look into all of these allegations. Well, thanks to the Republicans, we're now funding it fully to like $140 million next year. So, I mean, don't tread on me. I mean, tread all over me. Let's go over to the Small Business Administration. This is a report came out of City Journal, and it's about how DEI is alive and well at the Small Business Administration when it comes to giving out your money to, I don't know, buy things for the federal government. I mean, there's got to be a process in which that happens, right? There's normally like a bid that happens, and we don't have a department of chair making or carpet laying. Those sorts of things get contracted out. So the federal government has to spend money for those sorts of things. And allegedly, we don't examine immutable characteristics like the color of your skin, or what you got dangling between your legs, your religion, or who you like to have sex with. Those sorts of things aren't supposed to weigh into when we buy chairs for the office, or when we install a carpet system, or hire a plumber, something to that effect. But it's still going on at the Small Business Administration. So the piece is called "No White Men Need Apply." It comes from city-journal.org and digs into what's going on, because DEI, we were told, is DIE by the Trump administration when the president signed an executive order forbidding federal DEI discrimination. But federal district court also said that you can't do it. But in fiscal 2025, they saw the largest number of spending on what are these called? These are disadvantaged businesses, because it's presumed that if you're owned by a woman or by a racial minority, that you are disadvantaged. Now, how is that happening? Now, apparently the people over at the Small Business Administration are not really sympathetic to the president's worldview on this, that merit should matter. But instead, they're undermining it because they have found a hack in order to get social disadvantage narratives into applications. So what they basically say is, hey, you want to get a government contract? You just write down things like, I believe my application for getting a loan was denied because I'm Black, Or I believe that my request to have a certain major in college was denied because I'm a woman. And as long as you put that necessary language in there, they know that you're a racial minority or they know that you're a woman, and ergo, you will go to the front of the line. And you don't need any more evidence of that. Not a single award went to white men businesses for these particular bids that went out. Now, beyond just being really racist and really gross and happening in the current administration, uh, this is ripe for fraud. I'm not a criminal mastermind, but I did work in law enforcement, and I could see a couple ways that this could go really poorly. I mean, everybody's very upset with what's going on, and childcare fraud and healthcare fraud that we're seeing in Minnesota, and now it's being expanded into other states. I think Maine is getting a big uptick of it that we're at least seeing reported. California undisputably is. But how about a couple ideas? One, why wouldn't you just appoint a racial minority or a woman to be the figurehead of your organization, even though they're not really in charge? And then you could be a very successful company. You're not disadvantaged at all. You're just kind of playing the game. Or how about a front company? If you're a black guy or you're a woman, you just set up a company that has nothing to it and then bid, say you're disadvantaged, get the deal, and then just subcontract all of the work out to somebody else. You shave off a piece for yourself. That's fraud. Both of those are. You should be prosecuted for it, but it didn't take me really long to noodle out those. So as long as we're in the area of trying to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, I mean, wasn't that the reason that we had the Department of Government Efficiency to sort of identify these things? Now, this could be undermining the Trump administration. Maybe. I mean, lots of communists still in the government. But one last thing that caught my eye, again, from this City Journal piece, and the piece is called No White Men Need Apply. And I'll just read it verbatim to you. President Biden's Small Business Administration sought to award 15% of all federal contracts to disadvantaged firms. Trump's Small Business Administration's administrator, Kelly Loeffler, has reduced the goal to the law's actual standard of 5%. Why is there a standard that's there at all? How is there possibly a law on the books that says that you need to give 5% of government contracts to people based on immutable characteristics? Didn't we just celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. like a week ago? The content of character, not the color of your skin. And yet, under the current Republican administration, we are still in this area of, we have to recognize certain racial minority groups are disadvantaged. We have to do our land acknowledgement. 5%, Steve. Steve, it's just 5%. 5% of the billions, if not trillions of dollars that our government spends is specifically going to not the best. I mean, if they are the best, they should just compete. But if we're going to preference individuals based on things that are not what we need them to do, it's a lot like doing non-essential work for the government. It's a lot like funding non-essential work and workers and contracts using theft, taxation, or inflation in order to do it. It's harming your own population in order to feel better about yourself, to tout some sort of victory that you think because of civil rights. It's gross. Now, I've got one more that I want to get to that's in the negative space, but then we'll quickly and rapidly try to make you happy on your Monday here with a couple others to close it out on the day. And just, this is about the Department of Homeland Security and how they are bribing illegal aliens to leave the country. Now, the Department of Homeland Security is offering $1,000 payments for illegal aliens who just self-deport. It actually went up to $3,000 over the holidays. Like, buy your family in Nicaragua some Christmas presents. Here's $3,000. They've spent $100 million at this point. The Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security, her name is Tricia McLaughlin, said that they're actually saving us money. I mean, geez, they're just fiscal conservatives. Given an illegal $1,000, it would normally cost around $17,000 to deport an illegal alien. A couple of things on this one. Number one, why would it cost so much? Just march them down to the border. I don't know why it costs anything at all. I mean, once you get that Trail of Tears flowing, I think people will self-deport and they see that the conditions are suboptimal. But, Steve, you're kind of extreme. Yeah, I am. But I have very small number of expectations of my federal government. Defending the border is one of them, and apparently they can't seem to get it done. On top of that, I am an American man. Ergo, I have to think about the Roman Empire at least once a week, right? Right? I believe the Roman Empire started paying the Huns to not invade. That didn't end really well for them. History just, it seems to have a way of rhyming and repeating, doesn't it? All right, let's go over to a couple other stories now that are a little bit more positive here as we are approaching the end of the American Radicals podcast on a Monday, guys. If you haven't already, just give us a nice thumbs up, subscribe, follow, share, do all those things. Really appreciate it. Trying to grow out the brand here. Now, this one comes from CBS, and it's related to the goings-on in Minnesota, the anti-ICE protests. Don Lemon, he didn't get charged. Apparently, the Department of Justice tried to get him charged and was unable to get the arrest warrant. They've got a few of those folks already in handcuffs. But the headline here from CBS, appeals court declines to order lower court to sign arrest warrants against Don Lemon and others in a church protest. Now, apparently, the federal judge originally in this case said, no, I'm not giving the arrest warrant. The DOJ flipped its lid and said, this is a national security incident. We're taking this directly to the appeals court, and they have to order the lower court to sign these warrants for us, because if we don't, then we're just going to have rampaging bands of anti-ICE protesters invading churches around the country. It's national security. So they pressured the appeals court to take this up immediately. And the appeals court said, you know what? There is probable cause here. It actually said that Don Lemon, probable cause to believe, violated the law. So the lower court should have issued an arrest warrant, but we're not going to make them do it. Now, before you get your panties in a wad and say, we got to impeach the judges, go with me on this. Process is important. Process matters. Now, they wanted the complaints, the arrest warrants, when I say they, the Department of Justice, because they wanted to send a message. Okay. But what was the exigency? They claimed that it was national security. Okay. If people invade a church, that is damage. But is it physically threatening people? Was anybody hurt? Did anybody have a broken bone? Was anybody murdered inside the church? No. So the complaint really wasn't necessary. Now, the appeals court saying that there was probable cause to arrest Don Lemon and then not having it happen will get people angry. But, and I'm loath to say it, you got to give them a little more time. Not very much, not 6 to 8 months, Dan Bongino style. They're going to go to grand jury, like they should for these sorts of violations. Go to grand jury, secure the indictment, you get your arrest warrant, and then you grab the person. If you invert it, you're doing the January 6th thing. You're going the complaint route, which is unusual. It's used for exigency, which doesn't exist here. And then you're doing it to make the process the punishment because it requires an arrest, not just a summons. And you want to just send the message that we're doing something. I understand that you want to send the message to encourage people to and dissuade people from invading churches. But are you really concerned about that? I think you're more concerned about impressing the president, seeing as how you've failed in every other initiative over the Department of Justice for the last year, or at least appeared to have failed. I think you probably succeeded because you never really wanted to have transparency with Epstein. You never really wanted to get the January 6th pipe bomber. You never really wanted to hold those government gangsters accountable, but at least preserving the narrative that we've been kind of slow here, so we're going to ramp things up. Don't need to do it. grand jury is still on the table, and Don Lemon's trials and tribulations are not quite out of the woods yet. All right, let's go now to Daily Wire and talk about some foreign aid. This is a good one. This is an exclusive also from the Daily Wire, which I don't know. Are they putting everything behind a paywall now? Good luck. All right, exclusive. State Department to permanently end aid to Somalia after warehouses of food disappear. Apparently, Somalia, they destroyed a bunch of aid that we gave them. It got a little complex. I'm not really sure why they would do it, but it was 76 metric tons of food that the American people donated to Somalia, and they just unilaterally decided to destroy it. So now the State Department says, we're suspending all aid to you, and it looks like they're examining the calendar, and sometime in May, they might permanently and officially end all foreign aid to Somalia. Is it retaliation for the fraud that we've seen exposed in Minnesota? Maybe, or maybe just because they're not appreciative of the charity that we've given them. And I'm in favor of ending all foreign aid for everywhere. So that's a good thing. I definitely could put that firmly in the camp of consistent with don't tread on me. And then another one that's kind of like, hey, wave some pom-poms for this one. And it comes from the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, who is indicating he's willing to use the nuclear option against California's ability to issue commercial driver's licenses, because California is just given illegal aliens licenses and they can just travel all over the country. It's not even like they're limited to stay within their garbage state that they have. Now, there was some sort of a restriction that was placed on California because they were issuing driver's licenses and that expired after the people who have work visas or travel visas were supposed to leave. So yeah, work visa, and it says you got to leave on January 1st. They would issue a driver's license that didn't expire for months or years after that. Ergo, they were still able to work even though they were not allowed to be in the country legally. Now, California agreed to revoke 17,000 improperly issued licenses by January 5th of this year. But then California itself said, we're giving ourselves a 2-month extension. So now the Department of Transportation has withheld like $200 million of infrastructure funding. You know, it's in that good and plenty clause in invisible ink. And not only have they withheld it, but they're saying we might use a nuclear option, which would stop California from issuing or renewing or doing anything with commercial driver's licenses until we've done an effective investigation, which might last till the end of the presidential administration if they saw fit to do it, which would put 750,000 CDLs, commercial driver's licenses that have been issued in California, on pause. That's 750,000 drivers, and some of them actually are legitimate drivers. Too bad, can't drive anymore. And I'm kind of in favor of this. I kind of think that this is what I'm on board for. You know, I didn't weigh in today on all the drama that's been happening in Minnesota. There was another shooting. I'm going to let other people talk about that. I know you guys are probably oversaturated with that discussion for now, so try to work my way around it. But while that conversation is going on in the background with me and my buddies, and we've been throwing out this whole thing of, what do you do? I mean, do you invoke an insurrection act? Do we suspend a constitutional republic to save the constitutional republic? Do we appoint the Caesar and then hope he's Cincinnatus who gives over power after he's secured things and brought the temperature down? Or do we hope that he's not Julius Caesar who then just makes himself the emperor? Or do you do what I think is probably the most pragmatic option at this point? It is extreme, but just kind of examining the battlefield conditions. We're going through a divorce. I don't want to go through couples counseling when the wife wants to trans the kids or send all of our money of our 401k to a bunch of Somalis. So I think we just need a divorce. Let's expedite that process and withdraw all federal resources from states like Minnesota and California and Illinois and New York, including Social Security payments, certainly highway funding, agriculture, everything, every federal resource. And you know what? We'll just balkanize into 50 laboratories of democracy like the country was supposed to be in the beginning. Like, I'd be in favor of that. All right, guys. So that's going to be the end of today's show. And like I said, I alluded to the Minnesota stuff. Maybe we'll go into it a little bit more as the week progresses and get some more information. I don't want to leave you without a palate cleanse, though. And I know that this story was another one that was circulating around Minnesota, allegedly arresting an American citizen who they perceived to be a Somali, was an illegal. And she's claiming that they not only threw out racial slurs and they physically abused her. Not weighing in on that story at all. This is still the funniest clip I saw in the last 6 to 8 months. Today's palate cleanse.
So I'm Somali. I'm proud to be Somali. To me, being Somali isn't just eating bananas with rice. It's a lot. It's like it's an interesting thing. It's very hard to describe what it means to be Somali and what it means to be American, but it's like a cultural fusion. It's kind of like the bananas and rice. You know, people don't really see, like, you know, it's you know, people don't think, oh, you can eat bananas with rice, but that's what it's like to be Somali and American. It's like that combination of banana and rice, but you're gonna get what I mean.
I think she could be the next candidate for Miss Teen USA. Instead of South Carolina, though, it would be Minnesota. All right, guys. We'll see you back here again tomorrow, noontime. Until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals Podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.